choices tonight. Let's go ahead and pray, and then we'll take the offering. Lord, we're thankful for the time, and we are grateful that we can sing songs that have such meaning to them and such depth. And I pray you will help us to draw nearer to you on purpose. And I pray that you'll help us to be a blessing to others. Thank you for your kindness to us. We pray you'll bless the offering. In Jesus' name, amen.
You. What page?
38.
38. Thank you. Got to stand on this one. First, third, and fourth.
Oh Lord, my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, the heart around the universe is made. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Third verse. And when I think that God his Son not sparing, sent him to die, my sins and taken in, that on the cross I heard him badly bearing, he bled and died to take away my sin. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. When Christ shall come with shout of acclamation, and take me home, my joy shall fill my heart. Then I shall bow in humble adoration, and there proclaim my God, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art. Then sings my soul, my Savior God to thee. How great thou art, how great thou art.
Amen. You could be seated, or you may be seated, and we've got one last song from this side. You sang that wonderfully with the size of the crowd that we have here this evening. Awesome. On this side, do we have any favorites? Yes, dear. 426.
Just
good singing tonight. Pastor?
Amen. Good. I don't think we have any announcements other than what are in the bulletin. So if you didn't get a bulletin, make sure you get one and just read through that. And don't forget, if you want to come to the Valentine dinner, fill that out. And then if you haven't handed in the check-in sheet for the 365 reading, go ahead and hand that in as well. And then I believe on the schedule next Sunday night is our election of officers. And so we'll have just a short election of officers at the beginning of the service, so a short business meeting right at the beginning of the service next week on Sunday night as well. This morning in Sunday school, Audrey Henderson was here, and I had not met her before, and this is one of those that I had not had the opportunity to interact with her, and so we've enjoyed having her around today, and then for lunch, and some other folks up for lunch, and so I've enjoyed getting to know her a little bit, and I'm anxious to hear a little more about the ministry that she's going to be involved in, and so she's going to do that, and then we're going to do our Bible study after that. So I'm going to have her come, and as we usually do, she's going to give her presentation, and then I think she's going to give you a chance to ask questions. So if you have some questions, feel free to ask those as she gets to the end of her presentation. Audrey?
Use my magic clicky. Okay. Oh, just on the side.
Yeah, that's forward and backwards.
Awesome.
Just the one that's worn out is forward.
Okay. Well, good evening. My name is Audrey. I got to talk to most of you this morning. Probably all of you. I don't know. I didn't memorize everyone. But as I said this morning, I grew up in South Carolina. I grew up attending church, but I didn't actually get saved till I was 16 years old. And so I praise the Lord for that. I praise for Him working, for bringing people into my life who were faithfully and boldly willing to tell me the truth and kind of get in my face a little bit, but in a sweet and loving way. And then I think I left off this morning that I had gone out to California. I was teaching at a little Christian school there, and then I got let go because the school got too small. And so I was doing medical billing for a while, and I was working with my pastor's wife, working with the kids. I got to tell missionary stories, and the Lord started putting in my heart this growing desire for missions, but I didn't really have my finger on it yet. Another thing the Lord used was Voice of the Martyrs. I got to go to one of their conferences and hear one of the ladies tell a story about her husband who had been martyred, and she was sharing that story with us. And I remember that day, just my eyes the Lord was pulling the scales off my eyes of what was going on in the international church. Things I've heard about, but I'd never actually heard a first-person testimony of some of those events. And so one thing led to another, where I was slowly becoming more and more interested in world missions. And then Anna Musgrave and Pastor Jeff and Anna Musgrave came to our church, and they introduced to us this idea of going on a mission trip for the evangelistic campaign in the Philippines in 2017. So I was super excited. As I said this morning, my pastor's wife came up to me. She's like, "Audrey, you got to go. This is what we've been praying for." And so I got to go in 2017 to my first trip to the Philippines. I've gotten to go 3 times. I cannot remember the names of all the towns I've been in or all the islands I've been on, but I've been to many, and it's been a blast. And what's great is that I was kind of bored with medical billing. It's not the most intriguing job I've ever done in my life. It's certainly not the same as working with middle school kids who may or may not like to question absolutely everything you say. But I love them. I thoroughly love them. And I had told the Lord that, and as we were going from one place to the next in the Philippines, I told the Lord one day, this is what I love to do. So let me tell you a little bit of what we were actually doing. On the evangelistic campaigns in the summer, we invite people from all over the place. That particular year, we had a group from China. We had a couple people from the UK, someone from Africa, many of us from America, a few people from Singapore. We all came into the Philippines, and we would spend a week just blitzing the college campuses and the high school campuses. So we'd get our assignment the night before. You're in group A, you leave at 4 o'clock. No one liked that group. You're in group C, you leave at 8. Everyone loved that group. I didn't land in that group very often. I usually land in like the 4 to 5:30 group. So I'm waiting for the day when I actually look older instead of like one of the younger people, so I get one of the later groups. That's just, if you come, look older, that's my advice, okay? But we get our bus, and they say, okay, you go on your bus, we go out to the schools. As soon as we pull into the school parking lot, they're starting to tell us already, this school has 25 classes, and we've only got 15 minutes per classroom. And they will go and talk to the principal, confirm everything, come back. Okay, you only get 15 minutes per classroom, and you'll probably get 2 to 3 classrooms each if you stay on time. If you go long, you only get 1 classroom, and we'll talk to you afterward. So we get to go in, and they would just put us straight in the classroom, and you just get 15 minutes to present the gospel from beginning to invitation, and then go to the next classroom. It was so much fun. And if you guys have never just sort of waterfalled the gospel over you for long periods of time, I strongly recommend it. Every morning, just get up, go to the mirror, and just present the gospel to yourself like you're talking to someone else. And you can go full-on evangelist if you want, fingers and everything. Like, it's totally up to you. Or you can be calm and cool and collected. Depends on your personality. But it's so awesome to just hear the gospel over and over and over again. And the Lord used that in my life as a revival. I felt like a sort of crusty rock with a waterfall dumping over me, just like washing away some of the crust. It was so great. And then, as we were going from one to the next, over and over again, I told the Lord, this is what I want to do. I love this. And so I came home, I was talking to my deacon and his wife, and he said, Audrey, if you love it so much, why don't you go do it? And I said, oh, okay. And now I'm on deputation. So when I get to go to the Philippines, I will get to work with that same group of people. Only in their year-round ministry, we don't do quite the same as we do in the summer ministry. So a lot of my pictures are going to be the summer, because that's when I've gotten to go. In the year-round ministry, they actually will go into college campuses and run evangelistic events or Bible studies, sort of depending on the structure in that school or the timing. And then they continue to have discipleship Bible studies with those people. So we'll talk some more about it as we go along. As it says on the screen, I have a 3-fold plan. When I was with the kids this morning, we defined evangelism. I think they're all hiding those, so I can't pop quiz them right now. That was a good plan. Good job, junior church. But so we talked about the 3-fold plan, which is evangelizing the lost, discipling the believers, and building the church. I will be going to the Philippines. Most of us know where the Philippines is. It's in the Southeast Asian Sea. But that doesn't help too much, because in the Philippines, they tell me that at high tide there are 7,000 islands, and at low tide there are 7,700 islands, but not all of them are habited, but all of them belong to the Philippines. So, more specifically, I will be on the island of Negros, where I have left my heart. So I'm on deputation so I can go back and find it. Now, what is a little bit of the need of the folks there in the Philippines? Well, let's just say if there are 104 million, there's actually closer to 105 million now. I need to update that slide. But if there are about 105 million souls there, if we took 100 of those souls and we were to put all of them right here on this side of the auditorium and then start splitting them up, the first 83 that we removed would be those who profess to follow Roman Catholicism. Now, I say profess because they don't really adhere to it super purely, in the sense that it's more just their heritage, that they are sort of traditionally Catholic, but they live just wild, crazy lives and then just check in with the priest every now and then, which, according to all the old black and white movies that I watched as a kid, is not what is supposed to happen. Apparently I was misinformed. But that's sort of normal for them. Some of the kids that I know that are in the SMCI program that I will be working with, they were saved out of Catholicism, and they look back and they pray for their families and they pray for their parents. A lot of the parents are not cool with the fact that these people have gotten saved, because they're supposed to be, one of the family, and in the family we are traditionally Catholic. And so that's a big burden that is still huge, and they're trapped in Catholicism there. The next 9%, that's the group that would be sort of in the other group. There are a few cults or sub-cults that are there in the Philippines. The biggest one is Iglesia ni Cristo, and in that church they teach false teaching about Jesus Christ. There are also other false teachings that have come from America that have gone over there that are pretty popular. And so we do see other missionary groups over there occasionally, and I see them go by and I'm like, no, I need to go witness to you so you tell the truth. But that is about 9%. So if we took the next group of 9 and moved them over here, that's what would be left. The next 5 people that we'd move over would be professing Muslims. In the most southern island, which is the island of Mindanao, almost everyone on that island professes to be a follower of Islam. Indonesia is the country just under the Philippines, and you may already be familiar with this fact, but Indonesia has the highest population of professing followers of Islam per capita for any nation in the world, even outdoing many nations in the Middle East. So that is a really high percentage, and to me, the first time I heard that, I didn't believe it. I had to go check, because it didn't make sense to me. But they are strongly influencing Southeast Asia, and there's a big push to influence most of Southeast Asia for Islam. And so the Philippines has been influenced by that. And that leaves just a whopping 3% of the population who profess to believe the truth of the gospel as we profess to believe it. That when Jesus came and he died, he took the full punishment of our sin. There's nothing left for us to pay for. There's no extra sacrifices we have to make, no extra works we have to do to pay it off. It's completely done. And in addition to that, when he rose from the dead, he made available to us his entire life. He gives us his righteousness. There's nothing left for us to earn. And that is drastically different from the message that any of those other religions teach. And that is a really, really small amount. A cool thing about the Philippines, you may not know this, but you probably do, is a lot of Filipinos will actually go to other countries to get jobs. So there are many Filipino ladies who go up to Japan and Korea, or even into the Middle East. Many come to the States, and they will get jobs as domestic helpers in other nations. And I look at this and I say, our target group is the college age group. How cool would it be if young ladies are getting saved in college and getting sent out into the world as domestic helpers, and we're sort of like, here, have some missionaries over in the Middle East, have some missionaries up in Korea and Japan and China and all other nations. So there's a lot of opportunity there, but it's a really small percentage of the people that are actually understanding the true gospel. With that thought in mind, we know what the first need is, and that is that we go out and we evangelize the lost. In this picture here, this is during one of the summer campaigns. We had gone to one of the schools. The schools are the population is so great in certain areas that the schools actually run 2 shifts. So we have a school here, right? Imagine in the morning, you have a morning shift of students with, I don't know, how many students do you have? 200-ish? 100? That's a good number too, all right? You have 100 students, and then in the afternoon, you're like, all right, teachers, hit reset, you get to do it again. Here's 100 more students, and you get to go for round 2. And we sort of struck the school right in the middle of that. They had done the first set of students already, and then there was a break, and then another set of students were coming in. So they were all gathered in the courtyard, so we took opportunities to play volleyball with them, to gather a group. Jean Paulo is the gentleman who's there. He gathered a group together and just started sharing the gospel with them. And it was fun to see that opportunity where different ones of us use different skills that God has given us to share the gospel with individuals. But the first thing that we have to do, when we see the need in people around us, the first thing we have to do is share the gospel with them. The lady on the left, in the darker shirt, that is Ate Joy. Ate is just a term of respect for the ladies, and so that's Ate Joy, and she is the one who founded Student Movement for Christ International. She was working as a domestic helper in Singapore, attending a church there in Singapore when she got a burden for her family back in the Philippines. So she asked her boss, can I go back to the Philippines? She went back to the Philippines and she started sharing the gospel, and so many people were getting saved, she couldn't do anything. She couldn't start churches, she couldn't preach. So she goes back and she finds Mike Reddick, who was working in Singapore. He attends that church now, and he's not on paid staff, but he does work for them as the evangelistic pastor. He's affiliated with Gospel Light Christian Church in Singapore. And she went back and found him and asked for help, and he came back with her, and in 1998, they founded Student Movement for Christ International. And they work with college campuses, as I said earlier, and they set up evangelistic programs there and have Bible studies there with them in order to share the gospel and then to follow up and disciple with individuals. During the summer, we have the evangelistic campaign. This is one of the pictures of the campaign. The summer campaigns are really, really fun because, as I said, you get to just blitz the schools. You go in, you present the gospel, you go to the next room, you present the gospel, you just go from classroom to classroom. You're exhausted by the end of the day, but it is so exciting and so fun. In this classroom, there are roughly 50 to 60 students in the classroom. How many teachers do we have in here? Do we have any? Y'all stayed home tonight. I don't blame you. All right, but most of the time in America, we sort of max out at about 30 to 35 students in a classroom. In the Philippines, we have had 50 to 60 is about the average, about the norm. And I have been in one classroom, there were 75 students in one classroom, packed like sardines, in my opinion, because I'm like, elbow room, cried Daniel Boone, but they're not. They're all packed in like this. And they're used to it, so it doesn't bother them. But it's amazing to me because as we get to go in, and we get to, let's say we get to talk to 3 classes in a day, that's 150 people right away that we got to share the gospel with. Times 8 people in the classroom. I'll let you do the math because I don't actually do math in my head very well. But it's tons of people. Last year, in just 4 weeks, over the course of the 4 weeks, we got to go to 4 different islands, and we got to share the gospel with over 200,000 people. Now, a common question is, when you're out there and you get to talk to, in this case, 800 people at a time, sometimes last year it was like 1,000 to 2,000 people at a time, how do you follow up with all of them? Well, the summer e-campaigns, you don't follow up quite as much, but we do hand out tracts with contact information, so if they still have questions, they can contact us via text or Facebook or phone call, and then they can follow up and ask any questions that they have, and that way we have a contact with them. We have had many people, though, several people that work with us or volunteer with us occasionally, who were saved because when they heard it in high school, they didn't quite understand it all, but then when they got to college, they met with our college groups, and then it clicked, and the Lord saved them, and now they volunteer with us and continue to help. So even though sometimes you feel like, wow, we're talking to hundreds of people at a time, how do they learn it? God is faithful, and He sends His word out, and He doesn't let it come back void. And so it's exciting to hear those testimonies and remember, even while we're here, stay faithful sharing the gospel because God will not let it come back void. These are some of the folks that joined us for eCampaign 2 summers ago. We have 3 gentlemen from India that now live in Singapore, and then 2 ladies from America. One of them's me, you probably recognize me. And then the one that's between me and the other American, she is actually going to be my team leader when I am there in the Philippines. She recently just took the position as leader of Student Movement for Christ International. She was saved through the program like 10 or 15 years ago, and she has worked with the Reddics in several different aspects of ministry over that time. So she's going to be like our coordinator when I get there. So we all know there's evangelism, and then after you've shared the gospel and people are getting saved, they're getting born again. And we know when you're born, you're a little baby, right? And babies don't just get up and walk and talk. They need help. They need to be encouraged, taught how to study the Bible, taught how to recognize conviction, taught how to respond to the Holy Spirit and how to encourage others. And we call that process of teaching, we call it discipleship. And what's cool is with the college programs, because a lot of our meetings are more one-on-one, we have more opportunities, or they're in smaller groups anyway, we have more opportunities to make real connections with people and quickly disciple them and continue to follow up with them on a regular basis. In this picture, the 2 ladies on the left work for Student Movement for Christ International, and they're discipling the other 2 ladies through the college program. Pastor Ven Tabunda and his wife Aya will be my pastor when I am there in Dumaguete, which is the city I'll be living in. Pastor Ven was saved through the SMCI program about 15 years ago, and he is now the pastor of Grow Point Church, and he is one of the advisors. He works closely with Pastor Mike Reddick as they continue to grow the ministry and continue to coordinate different details. So I'll be under his pastoral authority while I am there. This is a group of people who are training for leadership. They're still being discipled. Almost everyone in this photo were saved through the Student Movement for Christ International program over the course of the 10 or 15 years. Many of them are still really young. They're just out of college. But some of them are a little bit older. They've been helping for several years. And the goal is to continue to teach them and disciple them. So not just that they are saved and now they know how to study their Bible, but they also are able to go out and continue the process of evangelism and discipleship. And as we do that, as we evangelize and we disciple, then we continue the process of building the church. And so most of these young people in this picture are, most of the men, they are now leaders or deacons. Some of them are assistant pastors in their local ministries. And the ladies are learning to help with the evangelism and the discipleship and Bible study programs there. So I pray that you guys will consider praying for me. Join me. Please grab a prayer card that is out there. Please jot your email down. Feel free to email me if I'm not sending emails out often enough. People think I'm joking, but I'm not. If you're like, hey, we want an update, just let me know and I'll send out an update. I try to send out an update every couple months or so. While I'm on the deputation process, it's a lot of, I visited these churches, and I have great news. I'm at 79%. Yes. Which I praise the Lord for. That just happened this past week, actually. I hit 79%, which is very exciting. But please join me as I get to go out to the Philippines to evangelize the lost, disciple the believers, and build the church. Shall we take questions? Do we have any questions? Terrible. Yeah. I can say salamat. That means thank you. And mabuhay, that means, it doesn't really mean hello and welcome. It means more like well-wishing or something, but basically that. The cool thing is, I will further that question. He asked, how's my Tagalog? The cool thing is, in the Philippines, they have two official languages, Tagalog and English. So I should be okay. Most of the college students, since that's the primary age group I'll be working with, most of them already know English. Even when those pictures when I was in the high schools, we talked in English to the students. Most of the students from 7th grade up, they can at least hear and understand English, even if they cannot communicate back very clearly. So I won't actually have to learn Tagalog. Also, each of the island groups, you can see several of the islands there. You can see there's actually the top one is Luzon. In that area, they speak Tagalog. Where the red is and the islands surrounding that they actually speak Visayan. To the east, they speak, I can't even remember all the names, Cebuano, I believe. And then I don't even remember what they speak on Mindanao, but it's a different language. So their primary language is actually their island language. So they learn Tagalog and English in class. So I don't need to learn Tagalog, which I did not purposely ask the Lord for a ministry. I didn't have to learn another language for, but I am grateful for that anyway. So, good question. Any other questions? I can give short answers if you want. I can just hold this finger up when you do it, like little answer, long answer. I'm just kidding. Any other questions? Okay.
Good, thank you. And I know of Mike Reddick and his ministry is a very active person, so they've been able to see a lot of fruit from different things, and so it's exciting to see, hear some of the things that they've done. And then Jeff and Anna Musgraves go there each summer, and I get to hear from them when they come back as well. So thank you, Audrey. Good. All right, tonight we're going to tackle another passage, 1 Samuel 25. If you are one of the young people that's going to go to the kids' meeting tonight, go ahead and make your way out. Mr. Larry is back there. And let me refresh most of you. Many of you were here this morning, so you heard what we were talking about this morning as far as the topic. We're focusing the family, and we've been through the study on rules for relationships and then roles in relationships, and those are listed in the bulletin. And then today our topic of study is problem solving in relationships. But that's a topic that's pretty big. And so we've looked at 1 Peter 3, 1 through 7, and it deals with a wife who has a husband who is not obedient to the word. And what does she do? And the generalized answer that I want you to get is she continues to apply the biblical principles. Submission, and then a meek and quiet spirit, and having a good behavior. She can't change her behavior to match that of somebody who's not living in obedience to the Word. And then Peter also felt that it was necessary to look at men and say, all right, guys, I want you to be very considerate and respectful of your wives. And there's a lot more that could be said about that, but he deals with that. But when thinking about problem solving in relationship, I had two options tonight. One option was just to give you some things about problem solving in relationships that were kind of general principles. But I knew we did have Audrey here tonight, and I didn't want to take a long time. And so I want you to look at another story with me, and this one is kind of counter to what we're looking at, but I want you to look at a situation that somewhat illustrates what we studied this morning, but it raises some questions that I want you to answer. I want you to think through the events that took place and look at them. So all we're going to do this evening is we're going to read through the story. And as we read through the story, we are going to have to answer some questions as we get to the end. And I'm going to have one major question for you, and I may leave you with as many questions as we try to answer today. All right? So let's, let me get to the right PowerPoint on my screen here. There we go. Let's go to 1 Samuel 25, and you'll notice that we're not going to do just a verse by verse. We're going to read some of this, and I may ask you to read a little bit of it, but we're going to read through this. It's fairly long, but it's just a story. And so we're going to read the Bible tonight, and we're going to talk about what it says, and see if we can get some help in knowing how to respond to some things. All right, so 1 Samuel 25, let's begin simply by reading verse 1. It introduces us to the situation. It says, and Samuel, book is written, 1 Samuel, Samuel died, and all the Israelites were gathered together and lamented, or they mourned him, and buried him in his house at Ramah. And David arose and went down to the wilderness of Paran. And so if you were to think about the background of this, David has been struggling in his relationship with Saul. He's running for his life, and so when it says that he goes down to the wilderness of Paran, if you would envision in your mind a map of Israel, and you know Jerusalem's kind of lower center, he's south of that. He's down in that area, and it is a very desert-like area, and he's going to take his men there, and he's fleeing from Saul. He's trying to get out of the way and just kind of stay out of everybody's hair, and that's not going to work very well, but he's going to try to do that. All right, so let's move on, and let's read verses 2 through 8. All right, so let's get a couple of volunteers. If you're watching by the webcast tonight, you're going to need a Bible because I'm going to have some people read and you're not going to be able to hear it. And so let me get a volunteer. Joe, verses 2 through 8.
Now there was a man in Maon whose business was in Carmel, and the man was very rich, and he had 3,000 sheep and 1,000 goats. And it came about while he was shearing his sheep in Carmel. Now the man's name was Nabal, and his wife's name was Abigail. And the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. That David heard in the wilderness that Nabal was shearing his sheep. So David sent 10 young men, and David said to the young men, go up to Carmel, visit Nabal, and greet him in my name. And thus you shall say, have a long life, peace be to you, and peace be to your house, and peace be to all that you have. And now I have heard that you have shearers. Now your shepherds have been with us, and we have not insulted them, nor have they missed anything all the days that they were in Carmel. Ask your young men, and they will tell you. Therefore, let my young men find favor in your eyes, for we have come on a festive day. Festival day. No, festival.
Festive, yeah.
Please give whatever you find at hand to your servants and to your son David.
Okay, so David's down here in the wilderness. We don't know exactly how long he's been there, but he's been there long enough that he can say to this man, my troops have actually been a wall to you. They have protected your guys, And it would seem that they've been there at least through a season where the sheep have let the wool grow, and now it's time. They did a festival. It was a festive occasion. They did a feast at the time they sheared the sheep, and that was when they were realizing, here's how much money we're going to make. It's been a really good year. And it lists the number of sheep he has, and the number of goats, and so they call in the shearers, and they have a feast, and this is a big deal. And so David says to his guys, we're out here in the wilderness, it's hard to live. Go down and just ask this man if he would give some food to us. He's got 600 or more people there, and he says, ask if he would share a little bit of food and just see what he says. All right? Now, one other verse that I want you to look at, I want you to look at verse 3 specifically. In verse 3, I'm going to put it up on the screen. Joe read that in New American Standard, and so I'm going to put it up here in that as well. Notice what it says. Now, the man's name was Nabal. We'll come back to that. And his wife's name was Abigail. So here's the man and the woman, and here's the commentary on both of them. And the woman was intelligent and beautiful in appearance, but the man was harsh and evil in his dealings, and he was a Calebite. This was the land that was given to Caleb, and there are varying answers as to why it points out he's a Calebite. We don't know for sure. The word Caleb actually means dog, and I kind of lean toward the interpretation that he was doggish, that he was kind of animalish in his behavior. I'm not sure about that. I wouldn't die for that interpretation, but that would seem to fit him, that he was a harsh man, he was evil in his dealings, and he was kind of just brute in his behavior. And you'll see that same kind of thing in the King James Version. It uses the word curlish, C-H-U-R-L-I-S-H. Instead of harsh, he was curlish in what he did, and that he was evil in his dealings with people or in his doing with people. All right? So, lay the groundwork there. All right? So, another reader, verses 9 through 13. Who wants to jump in and read? All right, Micah?
When David's young men came, they spoke to Nabal according to these words in David's name. Then they waited. But Nabal answered David's servants and said, Who is David, and who are the sons of Jesse? There are many servants today who are breaking away from his master. Shall I then take my bread and my water and my meat that I have slaughtered from my shears and give it to men whose origin I do not know? So David's young men retraced their way and went back, and they came and told him according to all these words. David said to his men, Each of you gird on his sword. So each man girded on his sword, and David also girded on his sword. And about 400 men went up behind David, while 200 stayed with the baggage.
Okay, so the response of Nabal fits his character. He looks at them and says, Who is David? And who's the son of Jesse? There are many servants today who are each breaking away from his master. So this may not come across to us as it would have to David's men and to David when the response was, but it was an insult to him. He said, I don't know who you are. Now, what are the chances that was actually true? Wow, I mean, the chances of that being true are slim to none. I mean, he knew who David was. As a matter of fact, knowing he was the son of Jesse, it's doubtful that they told him that. They could have, but he knew the situation. He knew what was going on. He knew the situation with Saul. Everybody did. And so this was not something that was hidden. It was something that was well known. And so then his last statement, look, there are a lot of people who are living in rebellion, and you're just one of them. And he just really, he insulted these men, and he insulted David. And David's response to that in verse 13 is I'm going to fix him for this. Gird on your sword. We're going to go down, and we're going to show him something. Now, I would point out, I don't think David's response is right here, and I think you're going to see that as the story goes forward. Okay, let's keep going. Verses 14 through 17, a little shorter. Let me read that one, and then We'll have somebody else read again for us. Verse 14, the King James Version says, "But one of the young men told Abigail, Nabal's wife, saying, Behold, David sent messengers out of the wilderness to salute or greet our master, and he railed on them. But the men were very good to us, and we were not hurt." And that's also translated, "We were not insulted, neither missed we anything, as long as we were conversant or went about with them when we were in the fields. They were a wall unto us, both by night and day, all the while we were in with them, keeping the sheep. Now therefore, know and consider what thou wilt do. For evil is plotted against our master. It's determined against our master and against all his household. For he is such a son of Belial that a man cannot speak to him." Now, I want you to notice some things in here. The servants know what happened, and they go to Abigail. And they tell her, look, David came and sent messengers, and it was a greeting. And that indicates it was a pleasant greeting. He was just talking to them, and he saluted our master, and he railed on them. He actually flew upon them, is the way that word is translated. He exploded on them. And so this gives us a little bit of the character of the response, not just the words, but the character of how Nabal responded to them. And so they give testimony. You know, David's men did exactly what they reported to our master. They were a wall to us. One of the great struggles out in the wilderness was that somebody would come and take your sheep, that you had to guard your flock because you had a lot of enemies out there. And he said, no, this never happened. And there's another thing he points out. He says, not only did they keep people from taking our things, but David's men never took anything from us. And that's an amazing thing. If you know how David gathered his men, do you remember how his men were described? They were everyone who was disaffected, everybody who was in trouble, everybody who had a problem. They gathered around David. David demonstrates tremendous leadership in that he got these men together and he said, hey guys, we're going to act like God's people, and we're not going to be out there just taking whatever we want. We're going to have some character as we do this. But notice in verse 10, it says that he scorned them for evil, and then at the end they note, evil is plotted against our master. They knew, somehow they recognized that when those men left, either there was a wilderness of Paran post going out, an email to everybody saying, watch out, David is unhappy. But somehow they knew evil is plotted against our master and against all his household, and he is such a worthless man that no one can speak to him. Now, this is one of the first places that we begin to see Abigail in a place that I always feel bad for her. I've always felt like she's in a tough spot. Because if somebody came up and said, you know, your husband is such a worthless man and no one can speak to him, what should a wife do? Wow. I mean, the testimony we already have is that this is not inaccurate. And so here are the servants coming to the wife and saying, you know how your husband is, and now he's gotten us into a place where we could possibly be killed, all of the men especially, and we don't know what to do. And you begin to really feel for her because she's now put in a position where she has to respond and does respect demand that she say, well, I'm going to back my husband up here. Whatever he says, we're going to do. We're going to find one of these ethical dilemmas as we move forward and try to figure out what to do. And so as we move forward, we're going to get more of the story. All right, verses 18 through 22. Let me have another reader here. All right, 18 through 22. Tasha?
Clusters of raisins and 200 cakes of figs, and laid them on asses. And she said unto her servants, Go on before me, behold, I come after you. But she told not her husband Nabal. And it was so, as she rode on the ass, that she came down by the covert of the hill, and behold, David and his men came down against her, and she met them. Now David had said, Surely in vain have I kept all this fellow hath in the wilderness, so that nothing was missed of all that pertained unto him, and he hath
Requited.
evil for good. So and more also do God unto enemies of David, if I leave of all that pertain to him by the morning light, any that pisseth against the wall.
And that simply means any man. You just wait. By morning, there will not be one man left alive there. David is furious about this. He said, I have been a guard to him, and he's returned evil for good. And so I'm coming to get this man. But it tells us that Abigail had made haste. She sprung into action, and she said, I've got to do something about this. And so she did. She gathered up plenty of food for these men and sent it on and put it on the donkeys, and she knew the path that he would be taking, and so she met him. And David is obviously very irritated by what happens. Look particularly at this, though. In verse 19 it says, but she did not tell her husband Nabal. So is this right? Wrong? I mean, should she have said, Nabal, I'm going to go do this? And you'll notice verse 22, I've already commented on that. She knows the danger that they're in. She knows the struggle that they're facing. And so this is something that she's over a barrel in. What do I do about this, and how do I respond to this? All right, longer passage here, verses 23 through 31. All right, Sam or Joe, got one of you guys want to jump in there? All right.
And when Abigail saw David, she hasted and lighted off the ass, and fell before David on her face, and bowed herself to the ground, and fell at his feet, and said, Upon me, my Lord, upon me let this iniquity be, and let thine handmaid, I pray thee, speak in thine audience, and hear the words of thine handmaid. Let not, my Lord, I pray thee, regard this man of Belial, even Nabal, for as his name is, so is he. Nabal is his name, and folly is with him. But I, thine handmaid, saw not the young men of my Lord, whom thou didst send. Now therefore, my Lord, as the Lord liveth, and as thy soul liveth, seeing the Lord hath withholden thee from coming to shed blood, and from avenging thyself with thine own hand, now let thine enemies, and they that seek evil to my Lord, be as Nabal. And now this blessing which thine handmaid hath brought unto my Lord, let it even be given unto the young men that follow my Lord. I pray thee, forgive the trespass of thine handmaid. For the Lord will certainly make my Lord a sure house, because my Lord fighteth the battles of the Lord, and evil hath not been found in thee all thy days. Yet a man is risen to pursue thee, and to seek thy soul. But the soul of my Lord shall be bound in the bundle of life of the Lord thy God, and the souls of thine enemies, whom then shall he sling out, as out of the middle of a sling. And it shall come to pass, when the Lord shall have done to my Lord according to all the good that he hath spoken concerning thee, and shall have appointed thee ruler over Israel, that this shall be no grief unto thee, nor offensive part unto my Lord, either that thou hast shed blood causeless, or that my Lord hath avenged himself. But when the Lord shall have dealt well with my Lord, then remember thine handmaid.
All right, we're going to come back to what she said to him here, because in the next section, that's going to be really important. But I want you to notice a couple of things that happened as we go through here. It says, I've got some verses up here, but I didn't want to put everything on here, but I want you to notice some specific things. When she came to David,